Well, good morning again, and welcome to the NITAAC ACT-IAC 2014 GWAC Conference. My name is Stephanie Cumberbatch, Director of Health and IT Solutions for ATAC. We're a veteran 19-year federal government contractor providing science and technology solutions across the federal government. We're truly delighted that so many of you have come to join us here today for what we hope will be a half day of spirited and engaging discussions around the value of GWACs for federal acquisitions. We would like to extend a super warm welcome to our federal government participants, GWAC leadership, our keynote, Mr. Matthew Blum from the OMB, and our moderator for today, Mr. Chris Dorobek, and of course my fellow cohorts and industry participants. I'd like to also add a quick note that for attending today's event, you will have 0.5 CEU credits available to you. We look forward to hearing from everyone so that our end game can be achieved, and really that is spreading the word on the value of GWACs for IT acquisitions, but more importantly, to provide valuable feedback up through to the OMB. I would like to thank all of our sponsors this morning, ATAC, ATAC, Sapient Government Services, CGI, SRA, GovPlace, and Red River. And I'd also like to thank our exhibitors who are lined here against the wall and will be waiting during the designated time frames to engage in discussions with you about the services they provide. Finally, I'd like to introduce Mr. Tim Smith. He is a Vice President of OnPoint, a wholly owned subsidiary of Sapient. Tim is responsible for managing the delivery of all of OnPoint's programs and projects and has spent over 20 years providing IT services to the federal government with extensive experience leveraging GWACs. Tim will be introducing our first speaker for the 2014 GWAC conference. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Thanks, Stephanie, and thanks in particular to ACT-IAC for allowing OnPoint to be a part of this great event. As Stephanie said, OnPoint is now a part of Sapient. That happened in February, and I know there are a few of you out there that are going through the merger acquisition piece, so we have our our multiple personalities of who are we today. But this is important, the acquisition that we had, because of why we're here today, to talk about the benefits and the value of GWACs. GWACs were always a strategic part of OnPoint's growth and eventual acquisition strategy. And because they offered us the value of a faster and easier procurement cycle. This is not only important to us, it was obviously important to our customers, allowing them to meet their just-in-time mission-critical needs. That's the value of GWACs. So as we go forward as part of the Sapient family, we're going to continue to leverage GWACs. And in particular, we're very excited to continue to work with NITAAC's CIO-SP3 vehicle as we look to expand our healthcare practice, but also do what NITAAC and a number of other companies have already done well, help take that vehicle into other federal agencies as we look to build our business with the Departments of Defense, State, and Energy. So on that, let me get to the important part of why I'm up here, to introduce Rob Coen. As the Acting Director of the NIH Information Technology Acquisition and Assessment Center, NITAAC, Robert Coen sets the strategic vision of the NIH GWAC program, which consists of 3 GWAC contracts valued at $50 billion. These contract vehicles, CIO-SP3, CIO-SP3 Small Business, and ECS3, enable any federal agency to quickly and easily procure IT products, services, and solutions in support of their agency's mission. The goal of the NITAAC program is to be the preeminent go-to provider of quality IT products and services to the federal government, enabling agencies to accomplish their mission through the use of innovative government-wide acquisition contracts in an efficient and economical manner. Mr. Coen directs a staff of 45 employees responsible for all aspects of the NITAAC GWAC program, which includes contracts administration, IT systems and support, customer service, contract holder relations, program outreach, business development, and finance. He has extensive knowledge of federal contracting regulations and the acquisition process, and holds a Level 3 Federal Acquisition Certification in Contracting from the Federal Acquisition Institute. Mr. Coen has over 20 years of experience leading innovation in finance, business development, and acquisition programs for the federal government. He is a 2012 ACT-IAC partner and serves on the Board of Advisors of the Government Information Technology Executive Council and the National Contract Management Association. Mr. Coen earned his bachelor's degree at the University of Massachusetts. Please help in welcoming Robert Coen.
Well, thank you, Tim, and thank you, everybody, for being here, and good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
All right. So I'm glad you're joining us here today for this first government industry forum on GWACs that's been organized in collaboration with ACT-IAC. ACT-IAC, through my experience, provides a unique collaboration between government and industry that really works to develop outcomes that are used throughout the federal government, used through OMB and throughout industry to to make things better and to move things forward. And I'm glad that they were able to be part of this. So as you know, GWACs enable any federal agency to buy cost-effective, best value, innovative solutions for any IT service and commodity. This forum today is designed to discuss where GWACs are today and the direction of GWACs are headed in the future to assist the government with quality IT acquisitions. As you know, GWACs were formed back in 1996 and have since received significant endorsements from the Office of Federal Procurement Policy. These endorsements from OFPP are a result of the benefits realized by the government when using these vehicles. Some of those benefits include access to exceptionally qualified and diverse group of IT service providers who have been vetted through a rigorous selection process and are able to provide innovative IT solutions for the government. GWACs provide highly capable and trained ancillary staff to support its customers from the very beginning throughout the procurement process. GWACs help to reduce the duplication in contracting by leveraging the efficiencies and economies of these existing contract vehicles. This is just a small example of some of the benefits of GWACs. Each of the GWAC programs represented here today will be sharing additional benefits throughout the morning. So ever since I've started at NITAAC, it's been a focus on improving service. So this is foremost on our mind, not only to government agencies using our vehicles, but to the contract holders, to develop that service to support our contract holders in meeting the government's needs and also making sure that the government's missions are met through the use of our contracts. So at NITAAC, we have an emphasis and want to be known for service excellence. And quality is an extremely important element to the NITAAC program. You know, I want to make sure steps and processes are in place to enable systems to function as they have been designed to function, and that our staff ensures all actions are driven by quality responses with quality outcomes. We have developed a trusted, reliable customer support center that reviews performance metrics to assess the quickness, quality, and level of response. Our help desk support includes not only trained, experienced customer service representatives, IT specialists, and contracting officers, so that all questions and concerns can be addressed. The objective of today's GWAC forum is to obtain not only OMB's perspective on how the GWAC acquisition process can be streamlined to improve agility, meet mission needs, and address budgetary concerns, but also obtain from you, both government and industry, your perspectives, your comments, suggestions, lessons learned, and strategies on how to better structure, compete, and award task and delivery orders through a GWAC vehicle. This forum is designed to be interactive and provide feedback. This program starts with our keynote speaker, Matthew Blum from OMB, followed by a panel comprised of the leads from each of the 3 GWACs. Our moderator, Dorobek, will be presenting several questions to the panel that will serve as introductory comments to the second part of the program. After the comments from the panel and a break, all of you will be addressing the following 4 topics. First is how to successfully transition contracts to GWACs. Second is, should FAR Part 17 be rewarded or reconsidered for GWACs? Third is, how GWACs streamline the acquisition process? And fourth is, what are the best practices for teaming under GWACs? So as you can see from these topics, we're looking for ways to expand the use and benefits of the GWAC programs. Your input will be valuable to all of us. Our government table leads will provide you with some initial guidance to stimulate conversation. Please provide your insights and input as each point will be considered moving forward. The information you provide will be captured electronically and summarized in a white paper for the Office of Management and Budget and the GWAC program's consideration. We also provide a summary to everyone who attended today's forum. We hope this half-day session will be informative and productive and look forward to a very interactive session. Now that you have a little bit of an outline of what we're going to do today, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Matthew Blum. Matthew is the Associate Administrator of the Office of Federal Procurement Policy at the Office of Management and Budget. Matthew manages the development of legislation, regulations, and policies, and promotes sound acquisition practices. His responsibilities include covering a range of initiatives to support fiscally and socially responsible procurement practices, such as the use of smarter buying practices, commercial items acquisition, contract risk management, performance measurement, and contractor integrity. In addition, Matthew manages efforts to promote greater use of small business contractors. Also, Matthew has contributed to a variety of contract publications such as Contract Management, The Government Contractor, and others. Matthew will provide a historical perspective of GWACs as well as OMB's vision for GWACs in the future. So with everybody, please welcome Matthew Blum.
Good morning. See, you trained them well. They're already responded. They knew the answer. It's actually great to be here. Just to take a minute about ACT-IAC. Over the last several years that I have worked with you all, you've provided some very valuable input on a number of priority issues that the Office of Federal Procurement Policy has been focusing on. One was our Mythbusters campaign from several years ago that I know is near and dear to many of your hearts and was designed as the start of a conversation to improve communications between government and vendors. That is ongoing. I think that some of the information gathering that you did and recommendations that you gave were very important to that effort. And more recently, in the spirit of buying smarter, with respect to information technology, you all recently put out a white paper related to the use of agile techniques in software development, which is also of great interest to us as we think about how we can take better advantage of successful commercial practices that are customer-driven and make sure then that we align agency needs with the best solutions and the best contractors. So those are just two examples that of reasons of why I am excited today that you've decided to tackle GWACs and to do some good brainstorming and provide recommendations or thoughts to us. We very much look forward to that. And I should say, although Rob didn't quite say this, the primary reason that I'm here today is not because of my intellect or insight. That is what all of you are going to provide to the conversation throughout the day. But rather, I just so happen that I've been at OMB pretty much since the inception of GWACs and grew up with a lot of the policies surrounding this vehicle and thought for purposes of context it might be good to take a few minutes and look back at where we've been with this vehicle. I feel like in many ways that the GWACs are kind of at the forefront of the evolution of modern day thinking on interagency contracting and the increasingly prominent role that this tool interagency contracting has taken on in allowing the government to be smarter in leveraging buying power, and also, in this is a general matter, just improving the management of our goods and services. Back in 1996, when the Coen Act authorized or statutorily involved OMB in designating executive agents for GWACs, much of our initial thinking or the work that we did with agencies revolved around looking about whether these agencies could demonstrate good contracting practices and also had the ability to manage an interagency vehicle. A lot of the strategic sourcing aspects weren't necessarily present at the time. And more importantly, if you think about what the where we were with the Coen Act, it probably explains why we took a somewhat light touch to begin with. If you recall, there was a lot of discussion about the challenges of being able to buy IT in a timely manner. Some of you, at least hopefully some of you, will recall that GSA had authority under the Brooks Act to grant delegations of procurement authority. Agencies had to come to GSA. They basically had centralized power, and if you didn't have a DPA or didn't follow their regulations with respect to DPAs, then you couldn't buy IT. There was a recognition that there's a lot that agencies could do themselves without having to get a delegation, and so when the Coen Act essentially changed that authority, they vested authority within individual agencies to buy information technology, but they also didn't want to lose the benefits of the ability to bring agency buying power together, both for saving money as well as for other administrative benefits that come from interagency contracts. And so they authorized OMB to grant executive agents for government-wide acquisition contracts, and they also authorized agencies to enter into multi-agency contracts in accordance with the Economy Act and any other guidance that OMB might issue. So when we first got started, it didn't seem to make sense to put the cart in front of the horse and just to recreate a DPA situation. But that said, even in the early years, there were a lot of ways in which the GWAC managers, many of which are in the room today, since NASA, some of you may know, I know some of you definitely know, actually predated the Coen Act because you received your initial delegation from GSA before the Coen Act moved the authority to OMB. And Rob and his crew at NIH that program was stood up in the 90s, not too long after the Coen Act. So over the many years, we have looked to these organizations at GSA and others as leaders in thinking about interagency contracts. Let me just name a few because I think we don't spend enough time sometimes stepping back and just celebrating success and accomplishment or progress. One is that you all were among the first large-scale users of multiple award IDIQ contracts. You may recall that until 1994 there was a question about whether there was even legal authority to issue multiple contracts under the same solicitation. That, of course, is now commonplace, but when the authority was first authorized in 1994, it took a little while to get off the ground, and it was agencies that had, with the GWAC programs, that used these vehicles to help facilitate interagency contracting. Second, in some ways, you all, I say you all, the managers and the contractors that were participating in these early vehicles helped to establish the rules of the road. I think some of you will remember we had a Mayflower Compact that was established when Steve Kellman was the administrator, and this was recognizing that sometimes in rulemaking it takes time to catch up with practices, and so we wanted to make sure that as these thoughts were being undertaken, that we were smart in our buying practices. So if you looked at that compact, you'd see many things that are familiar today in terms of making sure that customers are reviewing work statements, that fees are aligned to actual costs, that we're providing a fair opportunity to be considered. We also established a Program Managers Council, might say in some ways a very early version of the Strategic Sourcing Leadership Council, just to bring people together and to share best practices. You all were among the, and I don't have to tell you this, you know it, among the first users of business cases. As I mentioned, we initially focused on the ability to exercise good contracting practices, but there was always in there as well consideration of the value proposition, in particular the demand for the vehicle. We always, I think, worked closely to make sure that the service providers had a customer base that made sense and that there was going to be usage for the vehicle that would justify the expenditure of taxpayer funds to support the program. And that business case process that we developed that evolved was also endorsed by the SARA panel in the mid-2000s and became the baseline for the business case process that we use today. You were early demonstrators of the ability to balance the benefit of a leveraged vehicle and small business participation. There were GWACs, as you know, and there exist today, that were set up as set-asides, total set-asides for small businesses. But we also had GWACs. I think the ITOP program at the Department of Transportation was one of the first, at least that I recall, that was proactively using what I think today we would call a reserve, where some small businesses can do some of the work some of the time, but not necessarily all of the work or a segment of the work all of the time, and you would reserve slots for small business participation in the award so that they would then have an ability to participate in the fair opportunity process. And we know, I just happen to be familiar with NASA's, because I saw it recently, but the small business participation, which I think is about 50%, if not more, and that's great given our government-wide average, and again demonstrates, while there's always work to do, that we can take advantage of the benefits of interagency contracting consistent with improving and increasing opportunities for small business. I think that GWAC managers were early thinkers about duplication. If you look at the number of GWACs over the years, and I used to have these figures in my head, but needless to say, the numbers were relatively stable, relatively speaking, and especially when you look at the total amount of transaction activity in the federal government. I don't know that we ever got above 20. I think it was actually well below that, and I think today we don't even, I don't know if we have more than 10, probably a fewer than that. And managers always, when we work with them, I think we're always careful to refer customers to other agencies. So, for example, NASA, certainly being the first of the GWACs, could have taken on services but stayed specialized in high-end scientific equipment and products and referred people that really were looking for services to other GWAC organizations, and the same was true for other GWACs. And I know that in recent years, from some NASA SEWP statistics, not only has usage doubled, but I think this average size of an order has increased as well, which is probably an indicator of the contribution that GWACs are making to help reduce duplication. And you also help to drive innovation and improvements. If you think back to the mid-1990s or the early 1990s, the schedules were focused on products and actually relatively small dollar buys. And a little competition can be a good thing. I think that the folks in GSA that were managing the schedules program used some of this to enhance their own programs. And as you know, today we have far more acquisition of services, and it's a very large component of the schedules. And also, I think they invented what's now commonplace, our BPAs during that time period as well. Capturing customer satisfaction. We have always pushed to make sure that past performance is considered, and we know that some of our GWAC folks have been in the forefront in making sure that information is readily available to customers for consideration in awarding orders. And also, I know that NASA, amongst others, releases top-line information to motivate even better performance, and all of the GWAC managers holding conferences with program managers to make sure that there's regular customer feedback and lessons learned. Early leaders in focusing on fees to make sure that fees reflect costs and are regularly adjusted so that total revenues aren't exceeding actual costs. And if we fast forward to today, promoting strategic sourcing opportunities for IT and adoption of best practices. So and this is something that obviously is evolving and will be part of your conversation, but continuing to reflect input from a large number of potential customer agencies. This, again, I think has been around for many years and is certainly not new. But we've also learned through our focus on strategic sourcing that there are opportunities to help improve value by making sure that there's volume-based pricing discounts and having tiered pricing or other strategies to reduce prices as cumulative sales volume increases. Doesn't necessarily work in all instances, but in those instances that it does, we have asked that our GWAC partners take these into account and incorporate them into vehicles and make sure that they're appropriate terms and conditions in the contract, so contractors are put on notice and work together to figure out where this works. Also making sure that contract holders are providing sufficient pricing and usage and performance data so that this information can be considered by government users in making future decisions, so that GWAC managers can also make informed decisions about how they can improve the structure of their vehicles going forward, and also to share this information by analyzing customer buying patterns so that terms and conditions can continually be shaped and modified. So, I mean, I'm sure, as I look at our GWAC managers, that I have forgotten some things, but I think that's actually a pretty good list when you look at what is it that we expect out of interagency contracting, that there's that much that has happened as a result of this program, and that is something that our office has been able to rely upon as we have worked to develop policies to make sure that we're using this tool effectively. So in terms of where we are now, I guess one question that is often posed to us with respect to the GWACs, and I just touched on it a little bit, is as we have focused more on specific strategic sourcing opportunities that result in some ways in very kind of commodity-specific vehicles, whether they be BPAs or use IDIQ contracts, what does that mean for the GWAC vehicles? Does that mean that GWACs are passé, no longer have value? I think the answer to that question lies in what Rob was stating earlier, and also in the answer to a lot of these questions here, which it ultimately comes back to: how do we achieve the best value, and what are the customer needs? If customers have a need for the services or the products that are being provided with the terms and conditions, and people are going to use that, then these vehicles will stay. And if, by contrast, if needs evolve as they do, then the vehicles have to evolve with it. One of the reasons why in addition to celebrating success that I pointed out this list, is because a lot of these things, a lot of these steps came about as a result not only of good policy thinking, but just also the demands within the federal acquisition system of what was needed and what reflects best practices. So I'll be interested in hearing from the panelists directly on this, but I would suspect if you were to ask me, what will a GWAC look like in 10 years, I don't know if they can answer that question, other than to say that if we have the same management of those vehicles as we do today, they will be responsive to the needs of customers, and that's an important component, and what I would hope we could we would expect in terms of using taxpayer dollars. Now, in terms of making sure that we are well positioned to get best value, I think there are at least three reasons why that I can think of in the last 10 years that at least in my mind, make me feel more confident that as we think about what is it that we need out of these vehicles, that we will be better positioned to make those decisions than we were 10 years ago. And what are those three? The first was the placement of interagency contracting on GAO's high-risk list. Now, you're probably scratching your head and going, well, wait a minute, how can being put on the high-risk list be good? Well, it was a very strong teachable moment and an important wake-up call. Everybody, I think, was in violent agreement, and I hope and still is in violent agreement, that interagency vehicles are a critical tool for helping us get economy and efficiency in our buying. Yet, when you looked at the FAR 17.5 at 10 years ago, at the time that this was occurring, and you know this, the language just focused on the Economy Act. Now, the Economy Act is important, but after 10 years of having the Clinger-Coen Act and having this growing use of GWACs and actually having other authorities as well, it did seem a little bit odd, or a gap, that we didn't have language in our regulations that would help our customers think about when it makes sense to do interagency acquisition. So everybody agreed that interagency contracting is key to economy efficiency, but there was no real guidance on interagency agreements laying out roles and responsibilities and having key responsibilities falling through the cracks. In fact, if you remember, the primary reason why we got on why the GAO put this on the high risk list, it was in primary part because they were concerned that there were steps throughout the acquisition life cycle that were not properly or not consistently being addressed. And again, I can't underscore the fact that if you look at the high risk list normally, it usually relates to an agency's weak usage of a particular authority, whether acquisition or oftentimes it has nothing to do with acquisition. This was very unusual in that they didn't cite an agency, they cited the authority, the management of interagency acquisition. So this, I think, was a very important opportunity for us to take steps to close these gaps. And as you know, we broadened 17.5 to better reflect today's environment. It said if you were thinking about establishing an interagency vehicle, you have to put together a business case. We updated our business case process to ensure that agencies are looking at existing vehicles to see whether they would be duplicating and whether there really is a unique or different need that there's a demand for that will be worth the investment. And that we also ask agencies to share their basic analyses for others to review and to comment on. If you're thinking about using another agency's vehicle, you have to make a determination that the vehicle is appropriate to meet your needs. If you need acquisition assistance, you need to think about making sure that the service provider has the skills that you need, and that as you enter into an interagency agreement, you're thinking through each step of the acquisition life cycle, who is going to be doing what. And as you know, OFPP back in, I think it was 2008, put out guidance that provided not only model interagency agreements that were based on the input of kind of the key buying agencies, but also a map that said for each step some suggestions or thoughts about what are the responsibilities that need to be worked out. There's more to do in this space, and I actually am not unhappy, very happy to see that there's a whole set of questions regarding where we are with 17.5 and to test and see is there more that we need to do here to make sure that we are aligned in getting the best results. Second thing that I think is very promising and helps to ensure that we are aligned in getting best value is smarter thinking about contract duplication. Think back to 2007 in the SARA panel, and I'm not attributing this just to them, but I just remember from rereading some of their comments recently. There was a lot of concern about duplication, and there still is concern about duplication. But back 6-7 years, a lot of the attention was on a concern that there were too many interagency vehicles, especially multi-agency contracts. And when you think about it, it's not terribly surprising that people were having this concern for at least two reasons. One, OMB issued very little guidance on multi-agency contracts. There was little guidance out there at the time other than to follow the Economy Act. And secondly, as you know, the FPDS in collecting information collects information by obligation, so it's hard to see vehicles as multi-agency contracts. And so in the absence of kind of clear data and not seeing huge amounts of guidance on this, the conclusion that some folks reached was that there were too many multi-agency contracts. Well, in about either 2010 or 2011, one of our former administrators, Dan Gordon, was testifying on this subject, and I thought he offered a very important point to recalibrate the conversation. He didn't say, as I recall, that we shouldn't be worried about or thinking about duplication of interagency vehicles. But he said, in a very common sense way, if you think about it, what is likely going to be the greatest driver of duplication? It's going to be at the local level, where you have subcomponents just simply entering into contracts for a small set of a customer base. That's just, if you just look at the numbers, that's where you're at the greatest risk of duplication. This isn't criticizing contracting officers at the local level. If you don't give them the visibility, and if they don't know what other folks are doing, they don't have a lot of choices. But that's where we need to make sure that we are focusing and need to, when we're talking about driving unnecessary costs created by duplication, we need to make sure that we're thinking about it in the right way. So I think that was a second a driver of or clarification. And the third is more effective governance structures to facilitate collaboration. In 2012, when the Strategic Sourcing Leadership Council was created, at least in my memory, that was the first time that we had a body that had pretty senior leadership of people that could make decisions and align their buying when they thought it made sense based on commodities or services that strategic sourcing should be considered for, whether it's leveraging buying power, whether it's for administrative benefits, or for just smarter uses of how we use our resources. So that provided an opportunity to enable the sort of coordinated thinking that, while we had done it in the Program Managers Council 15 years before, it was actually had people in the room to make those decisions. As well as, if you looked at the CAP, the cross-agency priority goal that was just released last month, by OMB, you'll see that there is a continuation of this thinking and building on this effective governance through category management, where we want to spend even more emphasis, place more emphasis on managing spending by commodity or service area. Again, to help the fact that we have 3,000 buying offices, we don't want everybody having to operate in a silo and in the absence of both information as well as expertise for commodity areas, some of which has been provided by GWACs, but more of which can be, provided through this more concerted effort to think about strategic sourcing and also the particular differences that exist when you're buying different commodities and services. It's certainly not one size fits all. So just to kind of review that for a second, just to make sure the point is important. When we talk about best value, 10 years ago, we had people that, may have not been willing to consider interagency vehicles for the wrong reasons. They were fearful that we didn't know how to manage multiple award contracts, and so they didn't want to go to other agencies. They may have just wanted to do single award, and so that would be, if you will, making a decision for the wrong reason. There are reasons why we should, in times when we don't use interagency acquisition, but it shouldn't be because there's a lack of confidence in our ability to manage interagency vehicles. So the fact that we have now have guidance in place, again, more can be done, and then we're off the high risk list, instills that confidence and means that we don't have that barrier standing in the way of making a best value decision. So that's good. And secondly, with smarter thinking about duplication. 5 years ago, we had people thinking, well, maybe I have a agency-wide vehicle that may be of use for other agencies, but I'm afraid to kind of go out into the fore and actually ask and talk to OMB or talk to others about setting up this vehicle because I'm just going to get criticized for adding to duplication. Well, that's not the right answer, because there shouldn't be a prejudice against interagency acquisition because there's this, myth or belief that there are too many of those vehicles. Do the business case, figure out if there's the customer base. So the fact that we have, I think, gotten on track on thinking about duplication in a smarter way, I think hopefully will help to remove a disincentive to considering the creation of an interagency vehicle when it makes sense, and again gives us the ability to get to best value. And finally, with governance structures, like the Strategic Sourcing Leadership Council, you have people in real time that can think about these issues and also make adjustments. So if there are, changes in thinking, if analysis and research suggests that you should change courses of action, you have a group that can react in real time and make those adjustments. So I think that is also very critical to this overall process. And those are three, I think, reasons why we're better positioned to make these best value decisions. Now, having said all of that, I'm still very pleased to see the questions that have been posed today, because there clearly is more to do. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm interested in particular in the Part 17 just because of the policy considerations. But that said, also have great interest in some of the operational issues that are being posed in terms of what helps to successfully transition contracts on GWACs, practices for teaming. I think that's a great tool to help, especially as we continue to think about ways to help small businesses build capacity where they can't do things themselves, and as well as these other ways in which we think about streamlining the acquisition process. I would leave you at this point, or pause, with only two questions, because again, these are very good questions. One is, as we think about these issues that you're going to discuss, does it make sense to focus them just on GWACs? And what I mean by that, I certainly appreciate that since GWACs are all about IT, when we're thinking about commodity management, there are certainly reasons why you want to bring experts together that are commodity experts in IT, because there's special challenges for products different from services and different from how we do construction or how we buy office supplies or anything else. And I think that makes great sense. But from a perspective of improving the way we think about interagency vehicles and those authorities, are there unique issues to IT that don't also apply to other vehicles? So if you're answering some of these questions and you're a vendor, for example, and you want policies improved or contracting practices improved, should those messages also apply to some multi-agency vehicles that may not necessarily be for IT, such as for professional services like OASIS? And I'm just pulling that out as an example, nothing specific to them, but any other multi-agency vehicle that's not specific to IT. Again, there was a specific reason why Congress created GWACs, as we talked about, and why they were for IT. But we oftentimes, as we manage to what we measure, we sometimes also manage to the labels that we apply to vehicles. And to the extent that we have this label for GWACs, should we think, at least in terms of our guidance in a broader context, that which policies should apply across the board as opposed to just GWACs? And the second piece of this, which I think is probably captured in the maybe in some of the streamlining or maybe Part 17, is, are there any perceptions or thoughts or suggestions that you have with respect to how we use our business case process so that it can be done more effectively and efficiently from your perspective? I don't know that I actually have a lot of insight into how knowing that the servicing agencies are working with OMB and sharing information with other agencies, what impact that may have on you. But are there questions, you've seen our business case process, are there questions that you think that we should be focusing on that we're not, or that we are focusing on that we shouldn't? I think that would also be of great insight and help to us, as well as we continually think about this high priority issue. So with that, I don't know if that made any sense, but let me pause and see if anybody has questions or, more importantly, thoughts or recommendations at this point. I know a lot of that will come out through the day. And again, thank you.
No one likes to ask the first question, so I'll do it. That way we get past that.
Sure.
Step up a couple levels, and I'm not going to ask you about any websites that didn't work or anything, but there's been a lot of discussion that the acquisition process ain't working as well as it should. Even the president said it needs to be, whatever the term he used, blown up or destroyed or redone or something. Is it time that what can help you do your job better so the acquisition process isn't a focal point of problems?
Chris, that's a great question. I think one challenge that we have is in making sure we talk about big A acquisition, where we say acquisition is not equivalent to contracting. It's about program management. It's about effective requirements development. And I think understanding and making sure that people understand that a successful acquisition really is a shared responsibilities of all of these functions working together. And I should throw in lawyers as well. I'm a lawyer, so I feel like I can say that. But making sure that people feel a shared responsibility for getting a program over the finish line, and when that involves a contract, that means working with the contractor in a productive way so that we can get that result. I think that if you look at the testimony of Steve Van Rokel, our federal CIO, when he testified before the GWAC back in the beginning of May, the framing for smarter IT delivery was very promising in this regard, because Steve didn't say, the contracting system needs to be blown up. To the contrary, he talked about the 3 Ps. One is people, one is partners, which is the contractors, and the other is process. And I think that is exactly what, the space or the framing that we need to recognize that. And it's not just training of the acquisition workforce, but it's also bringing in people with programmatic expertise, in this case, with IT. It can be people with experience. Acquisition experience doesn't even have to be federal experience in buying the same types of needs that the federal government needs, that have worked with contractors in their private sector setting, and can offer insight into ways that we think about and shape requirements. So I think that the whole standing up of 18F, for example, and to provide that expertise is critically important, because I think it means that we can only do better in the way that we develop our requirements, which is obviously step 1 in good acquisition. I think it was also critically important to recognize that sometimes we let our processes get in the way of getting the best results and allowing our contractors to provide the best solutions. One example there that he provided is on, and I mentioned earlier, taking better advantage of agile techniques. They're relatively new to the government, but it turns out in industry, you've been doing it for 10 years. And this notion that you can have customer-driven requirements, that you have these very short sprints, I think is great. And what we need to make sure is that our culture is prepared for this and recognizes the benefits. When we talk about systems that get off track because you don't have testing until way down the line, Agile helps to avoid that by getting that feedback and forcing that feedback early in the process. We need to make sure, though, that our culture understands that some requirements may be refined after a contract is awarded. Sometimes in traditional thinking, we try to define everything before the award, and if you change anything, that's taboo. Well, in fact, if you have protocols, you can still accomplish the fairness and the transparency and the accountability. That's the reason behind the general rule of making sure you have your requirements defined in an understandable way, and still have some of that go on after the fact. So I think those types of steps, in addition to the work that we can do within contracting specific to reduce burdens and to think about better uses of these vehicles, is exactly the type of conversation that helps avoid people thinking it's just acquisition, because then you don't get to the right result.
If I was a sleazy journalist, of course I'd say you just said the president is wrong and Steve Van Rokel's right, but we know that's not what you said.
I did not say that.
Questions? Hi.
Thanks. Can you talk a little bit about your TechFAR initiative and whether or not you plan to make the results open to the public?
Yes. The TechFAR is, as I was mentioning a moment ago, is an effort to try to make sure that we have documents that are speaking to not just our contracting officers, but also to program people, lawyers, and others that share in the responsibility to get technology solutions over the finish line. And in the early iteration, or the first iteration of the TechFAR, we are doing a heavy focus on use of agile techniques. And you will see a number of questions and answers that we're posing that we anticipate the various stakeholders might ask to make sure that everybody is comfortable in both what the FAR authorizes in terms of flexibilities as well as kind of the limitations. So it isn't anything goes, but there is flexibility to get a lot done. I should mention, by the way, just if I may, as a kind of a general thought on flexibility, you know, you oftentimes and appropriately hear that there's a lot of flexibility in the FAR, and there is. But the challenge that we have is sometimes the way that we train our acquisition workforce or think about some of the flexibilities, they're used on an exception basis, and we don't necessarily go out and say this is a good thing. And I think we need to, when we're thinking about these flexibilities, also be thinking about what type of cultural changes in mindset we take. As I mentioned earlier, this issue with respect to requirements development, there's good reason why we need to have clear requirements, but that doesn't necessarily mean, or that isn't exclusive of the idea that you may have some refinement through the Agile process that comes as a result of customer testing throughout the process. So this Tech FAR is an effort it's not going to be a new regulation. It's really a guidance document or a handbook that's designed for the various stakeholders in IT where it's supported by contracts to try to take some of these flexibilities and tease them out to help get greater success.
It's, of course, hard to think of flexibilities in a document that's this big, but
well,
we
that
all
will
do
be
it.
Hi.
Yeah, go. Is it on?
Is it on?
Hold on, it's not on.
Now it is.
Oh, there
No,
it
it's good. Thank you. So I've heard GSA talk about, you know, the goals that they have for how much government spend should go through GSA and their contract vehicles. Does OMB have a similar kind of goal for or objective for how much IT spend should go through GWACs?
Can you just tell us who we are so we all know who we're talking
Yes,
to?
I'm Melissa Stoner with HP Enterprise Services.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
The best source of information, so I don't mislead anybody, is I would encourage you to go to performance.gov. There is a whole cross-agency priority goal on strategic sourcing that kind of lays out what the vision is, and it also has some of the specific steps within the next number of months. But with respect to GWACs, no, I don't think that there's no specific goal that talks about how much spend we would expect to go through that particular vehicle. In fact, and I will happy to have Chris jump in or anybody else, but I had mentioned during my prepared comments that we are working to increase consideration of category management, where you think in terms of all of the resources that you need to be an expert in buying in a particular area. And what that means in part is being able to take, and these are my words, so I'm not going to say it as articulately as Chris or others from GSA can, taking the various vehicles, for example, for IT, and enable so that users can make comparisons and see what's available on the various vehicles. So GWACs, someone would be able to look at GWACs, they'd be able to look at schedules, they'd be able to look at relevant multi-agency contracts, and then help to make the best value decision. But there is, I should say, there is guidance that was added to the FAR to encourage or to reinforce the notion of looking at existing vehicles before you go to open market buys, and that plus efforts to keep adding additional commodity areas where we can do strategic sourcing, I think will increase the use of those existing vehicles, including GWACs. And as I mentioned earlier, our GWAC partners are working with our Strategic Sourcing Leadership Council. They're part of it. And so where there are solutions like desktop laptops that are offered through the GWACs, these vehicles become important sources for those efforts.
I think we have time for one more. Okay, you're done? Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I'm Mike McHugh from General Dynamics IT. From where I sit, contract duplication and contract proliferation are major problem, very costly, and I don't see the benefit to taxpayer or anybody else really for that stuff. I manage and support about 85 IDIQ contracts, vast majority of them for IT services. The vast majority of them, despite their radically different terms and conditions, a given piece of work could go to either one of them, and often we don't find out which one until it pops. am I right in taking away from here today that OMB doesn't see this as a major problem, and OMB is going to continue to never say no to a business case, and that IT service contracts are going to continue to proliferate?
No, you should definitely not walk away with that understanding. As I was mentioning with respect to the GWACs was not as a criticism of GWACs, but just as a recognition that in some ways, if you want to reduce proliferation, it isn't necessary. It can be vehicle agnostic. It's just a matter of, you can have a GWAC, for example, in a schedule provide IT services, but we are very much, and I think I know our former administrator Joe Jordan had testified within the last year on this very point, that there's a lot of variance in prices that are paid by agencies, between agencies and oftentimes within the same agency and oftentimes with the same vendor. And there can be tremendous benefits of doing more spend management to identify those situations, not to get rid of contractors per se, but if you have one contractor that has many different contracts within the agency, there can be benefits certainly for the agency and hopefully for contractors as well to consolidate a lot of that. But in addition to that, the whole point of establishing category management is to get smart in these areas so that we have the opportunity and then can make the hard decisions to say you need to rely, these vehicles meet agencies' needs. The point of the Strategic Sourcing Leadership Council is not only to bring the agencies together, but to also give then agencies an opportunity and customers to say what their needs are and figure out if we have these existing vehicles that can get you to where you go or with modification, let's rely on them. So I can't tell you with certainty which vehicles when, but I can tell you that the point of having the Strategic Sourcing Leadership Council and moving more aggressively in category management is designed to address aggressively the proliferation of these vehicles.
Part of the idea here is that additional contracts creates competition amongst contracts, and so the government overall gets better prices. Is there a level where there's too much overlap, and has OMB ever pushed back on an agency when they go off and say, we have to do it on our own because, of course, we're different? Does OMB ever push back and say, you know what, there are government-wide contracts out there, you don't have to create your own contract?
I think, if we go back over the course of the last 20 years, just for historical purposes, I think for many of those years, we didn't have the infrastructure to do it smartly. I think today it's a different situation. We set up the Strategic Sourcing Leadership Council. We created a business case where we have sharing of information so that we have the infrastructure to do this. It takes a little time to get that in place and to build trust amongst the agencies so that people understand the process and are comfortable with it. But I think we're in a position to make those decisions and much better now than we were a number of years ago.
And I assume your slides will be made available, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Join me in thanking Matthew Blum.
Thank you.
And even though I've been talking, somebody comes and introduces me and the panel, and who does that? Oh, hi.
Hi.
Oh, it's Ann. Hi.
I'm here right now.
Oh, you do it. All right, I'm getting out of the way.
I'm taking over right now. Thanks. So really, thank you, Matthew. Those were great, insightful comments. The historical perspective on GWACs and to one of the things that I've always been proud of and to be part of the GWAC is the innovation that it brings to contracting. All the innovations that have come about as a result of these contracts being in place and working with NASA SEWP and GSA and other GWAC holders over the years. They've brought forward a lot of ideas. And those ideas have come as a result of needs of customers. And I think that, we listen to customers, and I think that's a lot of what we do, and try to bring those new ideas to OMB or to policymakers to try to make some things to change so that the customers can more effectively get what they want. One of the things that we're hearing a lot is that agencies are interested in doing a lot of strategic sourcing. They are interested in trying to figure out how to consolidate purchasing. And what we hear a lot is that they're afraid to do it on GWACs because we don't have BPA authority to do that. So, and then they say to us that, how does creating new BPAs at GSA stop proliferation of contracting? It's sort of like going against stopping proliferation of contracting. So at some point, I'd like to have the discussion as to how, more of what some people call IDIQ-like situations or BPA-like situations underneath these types of GWACs, so that agencies can get their needs met through strategic sourcing and through that consolidation, which inevitably saves a great deal of money. If you can pool together the resources of a large department to buy all of its, let's say, desktops or laptops through a GWAC vehicle and set up a sort of BPA-like situation where they can competitively come to that vehicle and get those needs met at a lower price with tiered pricing and really driving the pricing down. I think that at the end of the day, that's where the government's trying to go. But I think that there's a struggle with regulation in the FAR and whether that it can be allowed. Some agencies do it, some agencies don't. We get a lot of questions about that as to whether they don't want to, be doing something that they feel may not be allowed. But I think that it's a discussion to have, and maybe it's part of the discussion today as well as these other topics. But I think that Matthew brought a great deal of historical perspective, but also wants us to and encourages us to have those discussions about innovative things that can be done through the GWACs to improve the usage of them, but also to improve them so that they meet the agency's needs and that at the end of the day drive down costs for the federal government and also to work with industry to make that happen. So now I'd like to introduce one of our sponsors, Anna Hogan from SRA, who will be introducing the moderator and panel members. Anna has spent over 30 years as a federal government contractor, including multiple leadership roles. She's currently vice president at SRA International, where she leads their GWAC and Schedule Program Management Office and serves as the company's small business liaison. So please welcome Anna.
You guys are going to sit up here, so we might as well have you. I don't know, Chris and Joanne and Rob, I don't know if you guys want to go ahead and take your seats. That way then we don't have to make this. Exactly. So we do have a very esteemed panel today, but first of all, I'd like to thank all of you for giving SRA the opportunity to be here today. Many of you are probably aware that IT services and solutions is a major part of our business, and GWACs are a major tool in our toolkit, if you will, of being able to provide those services to our clients, federal government clients. So this is very, very important to us. But what I do have the honor of doing today is introducing the panel that you see here in front of you. Rob Coen has been introduced previously, so we won't rehash his bio again, but just as a refresher, he is the acting director at NITAAC for their GWAC program. And then we have, to his left, Chris Fornecker, who's the director of the Center for GWACs in GSA's Federal Acquisition Service. So he manages contracts such as Alliant Small Business, 8A Stars 3, and VETS. He oversees a staff of about 37 federal government employees that are primarily based in Kansas City for the small business and out in San Diego for the enterprise-wide GWACs. Prior to joining the Federal Acquisition Service, Chris was the chief of the Acquisition Systems Division in GSA's Office of Government-Wide Policy. He led an information technology program management office that was responsible for managing the 8 systems that many of us use routinely that are part of the Integrated Acquisition Environment, IAE, eGov Initiative, and 2 other government-wide systems, USA Spending and the Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance. So welcome, Chris, to the panel. And last but not least, we have Joanne Woytek, who's the program manager and COTAR, Contract Technical Representative for NASA's SEWP, Solution for Enterprise-Wide Procurement Program that many of us have dealt with. She manages not only the strategic direction and planning for that, but also the day-to-day operations of the SEWP program. For those of you that aren't aware, SEWP actually provides the federal agencies access to the latest information technology product solutions. She's a 33-year veteran at Goddard Flight Space Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. She served in her current program manager role for the past 11 years and has been a key figure in the continual evolution of SEWP since its inception more than 18 years ago. So obviously a veteran there. She's also an ACT-IAC fellow and a member of the National Contract Management Association. So welcome, Joanne, to our panel. Last but not least is our esteemed moderator, who will be the non-govy associated with this group. He's the voice behind GovLoop's DorobekINSIDER, which is a blog and audio program that focuses on 6 words: helping government do its job better. So I think we all can endorse that. He's an award-winning journalist and thought leader.
All right, we have to stop there. I don't even care. So
there you go.
Very nice.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. There we are. Thanks so much. Awesome job. We had a great, I think, start. So as opposed to that where you were spoken to, now you guys are as much a part of this. They're merely, seats are raised a little higher, but everyone's on the same platform. So we're going to really talk about some of the challenges out there. But I wanted to start off with some of the points that Matthew brought up. One is, do GWACs matter anymore? Do we need this differentiation? Do we need GWACs? Are they really any different when push comes to shove than any other contracts, and shouldn't we just have contracts out there?
It's our job. Nobody's going to say no up here.
They may say no.
I always say that, and Bob brought it up, and I think Matt brought it up too. The bottom line is the customer for us. And I've worked for NASA. Actually, that was an old bio. More than 32 years now. I'll have a job there, whether the GWACs exist or not. So to me, it's a question of, are we doing something that the government customers want? And since we are the 3 agencies left, and there were at one time 6 agencies that did GWACs, and they found they couldn't do it. That there wasn't a reason for what they were doing, or they took more resources. But we've all been around, 20 years or so. Our agencies have been doing this. I think we've built up that expertise, that infrastructure, that knowledge base of how to do IT services and/or products, solutions in a way that help the customer, that help the government, that save us money, and it's working. Otherwise, I'd be back doing something else at NASA. And so I think it's not up to us to decide if it's worthwhile. It's up to our customers. It's up to us to make our customers, give our customers what they want. And as long as we're doing that, then there's a reason for us to be.
Chris, do GWACs matter? Is this a differentiation that means anything? I mean, I would argue that it's working for customers, but the perception outside of our world is that it ain't working, and that there are real problems with both procurement and acquisition, right? Correct?
Just because I happen to be in a panel a week or so, another ACT-IAC panel, where somebody brought up, acquisition is a problem. I said, acquisition has always had a problem. You go to any talk 20 years ago, and acquisition was a problem. And it's a big beast. It's a difficult thing to do. It's and with the rules, regulations, requirements, it's always going to have problems. Our goal as GWACs is to take some of that problems upon ourselves to make it easier for the customer to not have to deal with those problems. Now, we're not going to solve them all. Nobody's going to solve them all. Otherwise, we'd be perfect and life would be great. But we're going to, our goal is to try to find ways to make that better.
Is this a differentiator that matters and leads to the duplication and all those kinds of issues?
So the fact that there are so many multiple board ideas.
Where's your mic? Do you have a mic? Can people hear you back there?
Fact that there, can you hear me now?
There it is. Where is it? I don't even see it on you. Okay, if it's working, tell me if you can't hear.
Right.
It's a virtual mic.
There it is.
Sounds like it's not. Okay. Now, I think the fact that there are so many multiple board IDIQs speaks to the need, that there's certainly a need out there. Now, I do think there's a need to manage it more closely. I do think that I'd like to see the business process managed a little bit more carefully. And a few of them may be challenged a little bit more because each of us, we've got 30 to 40 staff involved with the managing of these. You know, these other IDIQs, it takes people and resources to manage them. It takes you all a lot of bid and proposal effort to bid on all these various contracts. And so I think there's some limits to how many we do have. And so I think having a differentiator called a GWAC is probably necessary and probably should be managed maybe a little bit more closely than it is and steer more the agencies to these interagency vehicles as opposed to creating their own. I think it is good, though, that there's multiple. I think that there's probably good that there's some competition, keeps us honest. I mean, some days I wish there wasn't any competition, but I think it's healthy for the customers, again, thinking about them, that there are multiple GWACs, multiple agencies providing GWACs, but I think 3 is enough. And so I think it's a good distinction, and I think it should. I would like to see it managed a little bit more closely in the business case process.
Rob, how do GWACs help government do its job better?
So, Rob, I really got to move this down.
That's hot, man. You are hot. Yeah.
So as Joanne said, I mean, I really think that how we judge our success and how we judge our existence is our customers. We need to. What we do is look at our program, and it's our customer feedback that we judge how we're doing, and it's the volume of usage of the contracts. We've seen a 300% increase in use of our contracts just over the past 3 years. That shows me that we're providing a good service to our customers, but also that the customers want us to help them with their IT acquisitions. So at the end of the day, I mean, I think that there's this big misconception as that there's so many IDIQs out there, why do you need these? I think that by having GWAC contracts, I think it can help in reducing the other IDIQs, because we've had agencies come to us and not recompete an IDIQ and say, we're just going to use your vehicle to help leverage all of these buys through task and delivery orders. And to me, that shows that there is a need for these types of vehicles. They are built to be easy to use. They are built to be flexible. They're built for every single agency to be able to customize the terms and conditions to meet their specific needs. I know that I have lots of conversations with senior executives throughout government who say, we're so unique, we need our own vehicle because we do this and we do that. And I say, well, you can do that through one of these vehicles, and you actually have more control over what you were trying to accomplish, but you don't have to spend the time in doing the procurement lead time, in spending contracting officers' time and effort, and work with us to more quickly and easily compete and order through as a task and delivery order, and get it done more quickly, but also get it done with a high level of certainty that the integrity is in the process, but also that the contract holders that are going to be bidding on your requirements have already gone through an extensive and rigorous selection process to be able to show that they've already proven the capability that they can do this type of work. They've also proven the capability that they're able to do it at a lower cost. So that's what agencies care about. They care about saving money, they care about getting things done more quickly, and they care about making sure that it's easier an easy way of doing it.
So when agencies come to you and say, okay, we're considering creating our own contract or going to GWAC, what's that discussion like?
First we try to, what is the biggest challenge of running a GWAC program to me is it's all about education. It's all about getting the word out. It's all about getting in front of the right people, getting in front of the decision makers, but also getting in front of those people who are at the grassroots level, at the contracting officer level, trying to figure out a way to how to get this buy through. So it's a top-down approach and it's a bottom-up approach where we go out and we talk to both the contracting offices, the staffs in those offices, and brief them on how to use the contracts, but also to get in front of senior executives who are, been used to or for many, many years have every 5 years recompeted a large IT contract to meet their agency needs, and now are struggling with the resources to be able to do that, and are looking for innovative ways and different ways of doing it. So we are sitting down and talking to them, and the discussion is mostly ends up being about, am I going to lose control?
Right. Control's an illusion, for goodness sakes. Yeah, go ahead.
So a couple things. One is just doing a little history back with Matt there.
You're not going to talk about the Mayflower contract.
No, but an interesting point and one of the things that I think we all, again, because this is our job. Our job is to be a government-wide contract to our customers. I think that really is differentiated. A lot of contracts are the contracts to be contracts for themselves, and we're contracts for the people. I mean, it's kind of a cool thing. There we go. I got the bumper sticker. But
hashtag.
But yeah, and we also have to, and because of that, we are flexible and much more flexible than a lot of the other contracts, which is when they'll set their own up, and then they'll realize they have to come to us later and say, "Oh, I wish we could have used you." We'll get our customers saying that. My history thing was when we started SEWP1, we specifically wanted single award contracts, and that's what our customers wanted. As we move in 20 years later to SEWP5, our customers clearly want multi-award contracts with multiple pros. I mean, it's a huge shift. And our contracts have shifted with it. And that's my point, is that we went from, we're going to do single awards to now we are fully in line with where the customers are. I think the customers are seeing more of that now. I think, much like what Rob said, we're getting a lot more of the emails that say, I was thinking of doing my own contract, but let me talk to you first. So the word is getting out. It's slower than we'd like. Sometimes agencies have gone out and spent a huge amount of money to consultants, nothing against consultants, to find out that, in fact, what we tell them is true and that it's better to use us. They're often stuck with the fee idea, and it's like, but do you understand how much it costs to put together procurement? Do you understand how little the fee really is for any of us? It's such a small percentage. And they have to stop thinking about, well, I'm paying you something and not getting anything. Well, we do give them something. And I think the 30 to 50 or how many people we all have on staff are there to help those customers. And I can just do it for free. Well, you can do it for free and not have anybody.
Just have to pay employees.
Right.
No cost there.
Right.
But I was channeling, I'm sorry, what was your name from? Yeah, Melissa. I was channeling Melissa's question, how much should GSA have of the GWAC business? Easy answer is 100%. What do you?
Enough to cover our costs. And that's what we're after. We're trying to provide a service to just cover the cost of providing these services. But in terms of what our discussions with customers largely about is explaining to them the flexibility that exists with using these contracts. I mean, the base contracts are extremely broad. They can cover a multitude of projects, and it really is up to the imagination of the project team and the contracting officers who are going to use it to try to figure out how best to use it and then shorten their own life cycle by taking advantage of going out and doing a fair opportunity as opposed to doing their own full and open kind of competition. So a lot of our conversations are brought about by reviewing their statements of work. They come in and they say, well, is this in scope? Most of the time the answer is yes, but our contracts in particular are for services, and they tend to be for long-term contracts that the CIOs are concerned about control, the control issue there, and having the flexibility built into the contract and the order itself that can meet these long-term requirements that for many are unforeseen. They need that flexibility. So the conversations are largely about how to build flexibility into CLIN structures and a combination of cost, fixed price into these CLINs so that you can support a 10-year effort and where the crystal ball of the future is not always clear for that CIO.
Can I answer the percentage question thing? Because I was, about 7 years ago, we hired a business manager, some people know, who in his first presentation to me was about how he was going to grow the business. And I said, well, throw that slide out. Our job is not to grow our business. Our job is to satisfy the customer. And if satisfying the customer we grow, that's great. Our job is to make sure that as many agencies understand us and that they make a decision based on understanding where we're at. And if we're doing our job right, then hopefully, I would want 100% of the business that makes sense to go to GWACs should go to GWACs, because then we would cut down on the number of proliferations of contracts out there. So the better job that we're doing in terms of getting the information out, that's the goal. It's not going to be 100%, but that's, and it's not 100% of the contracts. 100% of the contracts that really makes sense for them to go to us. It's not every contract should.
But you have a lot of customers. I mean, it's agencies, but it's also all the vendors on those are your customers as well, right?
Right. Yes.
You have to please a lot of people.
Yes.
You play that happy song all the time. Questions? No one has questions? Oh, yes. Hi.
So, Mike Pullen from CGI. We've talked about this, I don't know, 10, 12 million times, but this idea and notion from agencies of this, and it's the not invented here syndrome. It's mine. I got to have it. I got to own it. And I know the three of you have been working vigorously to try to educate agencies across the federal space around how these programs can work. How do we really ever break that barrier? Because even today, there's Industry Day going on that Rob copied your RFP from CSP3 word for word in its initial run. So how can you get more contract duplication than that? How do we convince folks that we really don't need to keep doing this and spending taxpayer money and going after these contracts over and over again and break that not invented here syndrome of ownership that I really feel like I got to have it?
It's not just the not invented here. I also get, I see what you've done, but I can do it better, which is, because I can have more control. And it's like, well, there's a reason why we do things the way we do them. And it's just interesting. I always remember the RFP that came out that simply said, propose like it's soup. That was kind of the statement in the RFP. It's like, but there's more to it than that. There's more to it than proposing like CIOSP. And these agencies hopefully will eventually learn that. Will they all ever be 100% again? No. Part of what we're pushing now, and one of my goals is to do a better job of giving them the value proposition that we can provide back to them, and focusing on that. We're all government people. We're learning how to be business people. I think it's a growth experience for us up here, and on how to show ourselves as being worthwhile and what that value is. And I think we're doing a better job, because I think that the trend is going a little bit more that way, but there are still some stubborn folks still out there.
So we're actually seeing some of the emphasis that OMB is placing on using these interagency vehicles help. We had an opportunity with Social Security Administration earlier this year that was a direct result of management questioning about, well, why aren't you using an interagency vehicle? I mean, they at the lower level, they were fully intent, just like the example that Matthew was explaining about. At the lower level, they would prefer to have the control and do things on their own, but their management and Social Security said, well, they started questioning it. And so it is kind of a multi-pronged approach, and unfortunately, these cultures, it takes time. It takes time to change the FAR, as we know. It just takes, and it's slowly but surely, I think, getting around, and we are experiencing some of that. Like I said, the Social Security Administration is an example where they were driven to us by management as a result of OMB, policies and questioning about their business case.
So, what do contracting officers do and acquisition executives do when they do contracting is they read the FAR, right? So one of the reasons that we're discussing FAR Part 17 here today is because there's a perception in FAR Part 17, Matt, that, and it says in FAR Part 17, it says, if you're going to use an interagency contract like a GWAC, write a determination as to why. Do what contracting officer would perceive as a DNF, and to put it in my file to justify why I'm doing that. So that's a perception that, should I be doing this?
The default is not.
If I have to write a DNF, that means that I'm going up against something that may be not the right way to do it.
Risk.
It's risk. When I feel that it should be flip-flopped, and it should say that if you're not using an existing vehicle, write a DNF. You know, if we're really trying to get to the point where we're trying to eliminate all this duplication of contracting, you know, there's that, and as Mike said today, there is an industry day over at DHA that a lot of people are at that could be here that are talking about a duplication of an RFP that we wrote 3 years ago for CIO SP3 with the same exact 10 task areas and the same exact selection criteria as a GWAC that was created under OMB's authority for a $20 billion IDIQ they want to create. And so agencies perceive that because they read the FAR and they take it literally, contracting officers take the FAR literally, and they go, oh, I have to write a DNF to use these contracts. That must mean that that may not be the right thing to do. When I believe, and just to reiterate it, I believe that we may want to consider looking at that and providing some, you know, some guidance in the FAR that says, look at existing GWACs or look at existing vehicles, and if you're not going to do them, tell us why. Put that in the file.
There you go. There's one recommendation for Matt to take with him. Let me quickly, and I'm going to get more questions, but I know you all have new parts of contracts and stuff that you're working on, so let's walk through those quickly. Chris, you're working on Alliant 2 and Alliant Small Business. Give folks a status update. What do they need to know?
So we are in the early process of developing Alliant 2 and Alliant 2 Small Business, a replacement for Alliant Small Business. We were actually also
just yesterday.
The plan is to release a draft RFI probably first or second quarter of fiscal year 15. And so we are working internally to develop, you know, and make some changes to it. Alliant has been pretty successful. It's a very broad-based contract. It's fairly easy to use. It's you know, it doesn't have a whole lot of onerous requirements associated with it. Agencies do seem to like it. And so the simplicity that it represents is something we're trying to maintain in that contract going forward. We're also working on starting a VETS 2 business case. The VETS contract is getting a little bit old, and that process is starting. And we're also...
Let me go back to Alliant 2 for 1 second. What are the ideas, early ideas about what needs to be changed from in Alliant 2? What didn't work quite the way you hoped in Alliant?
So we'd like to have a little bit more... we'll make it a lot easier to award the contract and to do perhaps onboarding when the option, usually at a 5-year point, comes up. And so we are looking very closely at some of the things that the OASIS program did in terms of its evaluation procedures and process to make it a much more objective kind of, and hopefully easier to do than the more traditional evaluation process. And so we're looking very, very hard at objectifying, is that a word? Making the evaluation a much more objective rather than subjective process to award the base vehicles. You know, because it is a base contract we're talking about. It's really non-specific, you know, to any particular IT project, and we'll leave that to the orders and the order and contracting officer to come up with their own evaluation criteria. So I think the more I understand what OASIS did, the more impressed I am with the innovations that they implemented, and so we're looking at a lot of
Alliant Small Business.
Same thing. The two will be brother and sisters. I mean, we're intending that the scope will be the same kinds of processes, but set aside for small business.
And again, around end of the calendar year, generally, October to
calendar,
March.
Yeah, right.
So sometime like
for a
winter
draft
time.
for a draft RFI.
For a draft RFI. You're working on, Rob. You're working on CI. Which ones?
CIOCS, which is the Commodity and Solutions follow-on vehicle to the current ECS3 hardware and solution vehicle. So we just closed solicitation on that. We're in the process of kicking off the source evaluation board and going through proposals, going through the rigorous selection process of who will eventually end up getting an award. That's a vehicle that is centered around IT commodities with the focus on cloud as well as managed services, the new and innovative technologies that are going to come out over the next 10 years as we move to mobility and move away from standardized hardware that we've been dealing with in the past. There's an on-premises part of the contract and an off-premises part of the contract. So we have, it's a $20 billion IDIQ. It's, going to go through that source selection process, and once we've finished that, it will make award and move on with it.
And time frame on that, when will people either be popping champagne or looking for new jobs?
When we're done.
Okay. And Joanne, you're working on SEWP 27, right?
SEWP 5.
Oh, SEWP 5. Okay.
We'll be announcing award this summer. So the process is all done. So if you're thinking about sending your proposals so late, we still get those questions like, how do I send my proposal in? Well, that was last year. The main feature for SEWP 5 that goes along with the changing and looking at what our customers want, there's a lot of emphasis from the program office to do more information gathering, to provide to our customers when they ask for quotes, to provide them more information about what they're getting, not just from the vendors, but from a database of information, and then providing information to agencies. One of the reasons people get their own contracts, they say, well, I need to get the information. But they usually can't do it themselves anyway. But we have a database. We can provide them with how do they meet EP requirements? How do they meet certain other requirements out there? How many laptops did they buy last year? Really, when OMB comes up with their latest data call, they come to us, and in SEWP 4 we say, well, we don't know. In SEWP 5, the answer is going to be, well, here it is, and that's our real goal for SEWP 5.
And are you guys looking at things like cloud and how those impact?
That's all in, yeah. I mean, that's all in 4, and certainly will be in 5. Yeah.
Great. Other questions? I know you always have a question.
I'm curious about the issue of price. We hear a lot about comparing contracts based on published price ceilings, typically. Could you speak to what really drives price at the task order level and what the government really ends up paying, like numbers of contract competition, for example, or the number of vendors, and how relevant at the vehicle level prices are or are not?
So I'll start with that one. Wow,
your mic is funky. By the way, we all caught that you actually tried to sit on your mic and thought that you were a government official trying to talk out of his ass. I can't imagine. Sorry. Talk about bringing conversation to a screeching halt. Yeah, baby. Who does that better than I do? Yeah, go ahead. Pretend like the last 30 seconds didn't happen and answer the good question.
So we have actually just launched the final 2 pieces of functionality to a website we call strategicsourcing.gov, which is available to government employees to look at the actual prices paid on the Alliance Small Business contracts. And so we are providing contracting officers and program staffs with the actual prices paid on the 80 labor categories associated with those 2 contracts. And they can look at their own agency, they can look at other agencies, they can look at averages. We know that, for instance, on average, when there is competition on orders, that you can expect about a 19% discount over what the base contract prices are for these labor categories. And so, but an agency can look at their own individual data and see how they've done compared to others. And so this is a relatively new case. In fact, it was just launched last week. But we've been providing some of this information, and that's how we're providing it. So we're focused on the competition and making sure that at the order level, that we're trying. Our goal is for at least 3 bids per order to get the kind of competition, and that's the result. The competition drives the pricing down on the labor categories.
What are people really paying?
So I have a little bit of a different perspective. So I read this article the other day that Stan Soloway wrote about, if you're buying rock salt, do reverse auctioning, it would be great. If we're all buying the same exact computer at the same exact spec at the same exact time, let's show you the pricing and compare the pricing. But, over a period of time, what the government buys is solutions, right? Typically, they're buying things that are very different requirements, different types of things. So it's really hard to just say, all right, I'm going to put on my website how much everybody's paying for everything, and then have people come and compare that. And I know that Joanne has said this in the past. So it's a much more challenging thing than to just say, here's the prices paid for everything that everybody's bought, when everybody's buying something different. And then for people to go and get a misconception from that and say, well, USDA paid, $700 for this laptop, but DOD paid $1,800, but did they know what else the $1,800 gave them? So it's a challenging thing.
Are we comparing apples to apples?
Are we comparing apples to apples? And when you buy things at different times of the year, their prices are different. So I think that although this is a great idea, and I think that we should move toward the direction of trying to narrow this down to find a way to provide as much information as possible to customers, that we're never going to get to the point where you're going to be able to go to a website and know that that's the lowest price that was paid. I'm not going to pay more than that, and I want to buy it right now. Because industry is different and evolving, and technology is evolving and different. And one of the reasons that GWACs were created, because IT technology changes so quickly, and what you buy today isn't necessarily what you're buying in a month. Although I don't want to say that this is all a bad idea, I think that it is a good idea, but to think about it from a big picture perspective and a government-wide perspective about what are the results going to be at the end of the day, and is it going to send the wrong message? But I think that working with industry and working with OMB and other agencies, there's a way to come up with some information. Information is power. The more information you have, the better decision making you can make. But I think that people need to understand what the information is, and to look at it from that perspective, not from just from a straight line. This is what you should be paying for this type of item.
I hear you can get really good prices on an iPhone 3. So,
you can.
Joanne, what's the real price?
Let me just rebut that just a little bit, though, because my focus. So my focus is on services, okay, and I could understand the difficulty in doing apples to apples on a piece of hardware and all the different terms and conditions. But when you're talking about, let's say a software developer, that's a labor category. It's one of the labor categories. We provide kind of a low entry level, a mid-range, and a high-range labor rate for a software developer. I spent most of my career on the program side of things, not the contracting side of things, and have participated in many technical evaluation boards where it would have been nice to know the range of values for that particular labor category and other key labor categories that were necessary to do my projects. It's like, what we all do today. You're going to go buy a car. You're probably going to do some research online. You're going to go try to understand what's a reasonable markup that that the dealers are charging for their cars. And you're going to do that research before you probably ever set foot in that dealership. And so that's our intention with providing the prices paid data to both contracting staff and program staff, is that it makes them a more educated consumer. It doesn't mean that this is the absolute price, but it does give you a starting point and a basis to negotiate that's reasonable with the vendors, as opposed to coming up with some wild ass, I want 20% discount. You can, if you've received a 6, 10, 12, 15% discount, then it's reasonable. And then that's good information for a contracting officer to use to do his fair and reasonable determination. So that's the way in which we're intending this. It's certainly that's not one size fits all, and all the projects will influence it, what these costs are. But when you look at a particular labor category, all these projects require some mix of all these labor categories at various skill levels, and that's the kind of information we think is valuable. And I think we've been responsive to what OMB has asked us to do, is publishing the prices paid information to make the government more educated in its price negotiations, and budget estimation and things like that. So I understand the difficulty, and I've heard Joanne speak. The three of us have been on these panels before, and certainly from a hardware, even software product standpoint, with all the different terms and conditions and licensing standards, that it is kind of hard to do apples to apples. But when it comes to labor categories and skill mixes and stuff, I think there is some value in that, and that's why we proceeded ahead with that.
I agree, so I'm going to rebut what you rebutted. So I agree from the perspective of looking at time and material type task orders and those types of things, you can really do that. But if you're looking at solution type buys, which most buys are now through cost and fixed price type situations, it's hard to sometimes narrow down to say, okay, for this requirement there were 5 software developers at this level, the total price was this. But on this requirement over here, there were 5 software developers doing something maybe a little bit different, and their price was this. Do we want to post that information and for people to think that all software developers should only be charging this? Because we all know that when we read these statements of work that come out, we're reading statements of work for solutions to problems. We're not reading statements of work that says, I need 5 software developers, an IT support help desk person on Wednesday from 5 to 7, and to tell me how much it's going to cost. It's very rare. Most of the statement of works that we receive are about, give me your solution to this problem that I have, and whatever mix of solution you have, that's going to be evaluated. So you have to look at every single statement of work or every single solicitation a little bit differently to judge, is it the same type of work that was done at USDA that's being done at FDA?
Let me get Joanne in here because we're running out of time, and I want to make sure we discuss what we want them to discuss when they're separated. So Joanne, quickly on this topic, and then
I'll try to be quick. So I'm not big on services, but I will say that I agree with Rob. I think in general, services are anything is dependent on your situation, and we have this competition idea, and you mentioned 3 quotes, and in fact, in SEWP 5, we made it clear that for services, you have to do we're not going to say this is the price. You have to go out and do a determination because you can't pinpoint the price unless you know what the situation is. I would also caution, since OMB's here, that too much of a push in this way is a certainty of increasing the cost to the government the more you try to show things, because industry cannot show us the best price they can pay at the discount fire sale that we could have gotten, because if they show that, then the next person is going to want the same price, and they can't get it.
That becomes the price, right?
And then it not only becomes the price for government, but it's shown to the public, and now the public wants the same price. And now all of a sudden, we're showing a price that may be special and might have given the government some really good discounts, can no longer be given to us because industry will take too much of a risk in their pricing structure. So I think a lot more thought and discussion with industry needs to be taken in terms of what makes sense and what really helps the government.
I'm going to keep you guys to short answers. That way we can get a couple more in. Jennifer, go. Oh, here.
Okay. All right, thanks. This is about the, I'm Jennifer Shearer with Booz Allen Hamilton. This is about the BCA process and maybe relevant to the Alliant 2 for the small business categories, for the disadvantaged business categories and all that. When you do the BCA, what's the process that the percentages are based on? Is there data looking at, for instance, HubZone? How many HubZone companies are out there that are qualified? That's one of our challenges is finding the qualified companies in the different categories. And I'm wondering when the BCA is done, what's used to assess what's out there to meet those categories as far as the small businesses.
And can I'm going to tweak your question a little bit and just enlarge it a little bit, because one of the discussions that we want people to have is about teaming. So part of this question is about teaming altogether. How do you do that effectively? I know it's something that you get asked about a lot, but I think it's really important, and it's a struggle for industry to figure out the right teams, particularly with small business. So go, take it.
So I didn't...
Stump the band, baby.
Well, I'm not familiar with the acronym you were saying. Could you say it again?
Business case analysis.
Oh, business case analysis. Okay. Yep.
Does that include an assessment of the small business categories and looking at, are you gathering data to figure out how many small businesses are out there, and therefore what should those percentages be in the BCA? Is that part of it?
So right now, the plan is, to, again, in an interest to try to keep this simple, and unlike what Oasis did, where they had these functional pools to have different categories, we're still planning to have one NAICS code and for both the Alliant and Alliant 2 small business. So be the one. So they would have to be qualified as a small business for that particular NAICS code, which is the same NAICS code 54, 152, or whatever it is that we have today.
So when we went and we did the analysis to award CIO-SP3 small business, which is a complete small business set-aside, we struggled to really, try to get a category in there for HubZone, because our market research showed that there were not a great deal or a great number of HubZone small businesses who would be able to meet the rigorous selection process to get on that. Ultimately, we were able to, award a contract that has 8A set-asides, service-disabled, veteran, women, HubZone, so every single one of the socioeconomic categories. But the one that has the fewest number of businesses is, of course, HubZone. So that is a challenge. So what we do is try to reach out to the HubZone community to partner them up with the other small businesses on the contract so that they're able to team together at the task order level. And also partner up with the large businesses on the CIO-SP3 vehicle so that they can help them meet their subcontracting goals for the large primes. And one of the things that we did on CIO-SP3 is to make the subcontracting goals significantly higher than the standards, and to encourage those large primes to reach out to those hub zones, to be able to meet a niche area within those task areas that those hub zones aren't going to be able to go out and compete for on their own. So, it certainly was a great deal of time and effort and analysis that was put into to try to ensure that we had a vehicle that had the best of the best businesses, but also tried to ensure that we had a vehicle that had all the socioeconomic categories so that the government could go to that vehicle when they're trying to reach certain goaling in certain areas to be able to set aside for those different areas.
Joanne, any comment on that?
I think I'll make more of a general comment. I think one of the issues that I see out there is that there's so much emphasis put on the contract level and what the business size at the contract level is, and this is just a general government statement of how we do things. So, small businesses come thinking the only way I can succeed in the government is by having a GWAC contract, and so. And it's not that easy to get a GWAC contract. We all make it, part of our goal is to make it so that it's a rigorous test, as Rob keeps pointing out. So I think that's good, but therefore you need that teaming, the subs, whatever partnerships you can. That's where I think we have to have a little bit more emphasis, not just mentally, but also policy-wise, and providing incentives for small businesses to see the government is being useful, even if you don't have a contract. I can be a useful small business, but I can do it by working with this other business. I don't know what the answer is, but I just think that needs to be worked on.
And do you see any best practices in how people are doing these teaming approaches? I mean, I constantly hear that it's a struggle.
Well, we've been holding sessions where we bring in businesses who are small that aren't necessarily on our contracts to meet with our existing primes. So that they can, do some networking and to learn from each other so a lot of the small business...
Matchmaker, baby.
Right. I worked at SBA for many, many years, and innovation comes from small business. So a lot of these large primes are looking for those small businesses who can bring that innovation at the task order level. So we try to encourage those partnerships and try to bring them together. I mean, consistently on a day-to-day basis, we get calls from companies who are small, who are not on our vehicles, going, how can we participate? So we try to figure out ways that they can participate by having forums or, encouraging them to go to the website and where all the primes are listed and look at the different primes and the possibilities for partnering.
We're going to, where'd Robert go? Are you around? Oh, are you ready now? Or you want to do it now, or we have time for one? Is there one more question? No. Oh, there is. Let me do one more question, and then we'll go to the tables. And I'm going to have them briefly. You're going to make me run all the way to the back. Thank goodness I'm getting my Fitbit steps in. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So, save the best question for last. Mark Hobson. I am the specialist, and I speak for the buyers. I am so confused by all of these conversations that you guys are having. So I would encourage most of you to actually reach out to the buyers, because if I'm going to do stuff like you guys went on a great dialogue about, well, we need to post pricing, and if one software developer by labor category the same. So, for example, why is GSA's CAFs so much higher than SEWP and CIOSP3?
Why is there what? I didn't.
Your contract access fee. So if I'm a buyer,
It's not.
It's not that much higher. We're all about the same.
well, think about it. If I'm doing a $100 million buy, a quarter of a point of a percent makes a huge difference for appropriations when budgets are tight. So I think this gets towards the whole thing of reaching out to the actual buyers, because right now we've got some of our partners, team members in this room. Hi. But to Rob's point about FAR Part 17, I have no idea why we're even talking about that. Because when I'm doing market research and we're doing an acquisition plan, FAR Part 17 says consider it, but at no point, my first step would be looking at a GWAC, looking at something where there's an actual competitive pool, and then going from there, not reinventing the wheel every time. So I think it's a nice segue into getting in these table discussions.
And I, with all due respect, I think you're the exception rather than rule. I think most agencies say, how can I do it myself? But it's a, Robert, go ahead and put the graphic up of the two questions that we, just so everyone understands, if you're on this side of the room, if you want to talk about how to successfully transition contracts on GWACs, you're going to be over there. If you want to talk about FAR 17 and should it be reworded or reconsidered on GWACs, give us your, am I right? Over there, right. Right. That's what I said, right? Oh, good. Yeah, that side. That you go far over there to talk FAR, and you go whacking over here to talk GWACs. Talk a little bit about both these questions. Are there best practices? What do you hope they discuss that will help you guys and help them and help OMB do all of this better? Talk about transition first. Give them some frameworks of how they should be. What would be helpful for? What are some of the challenges? How can they help?
So in our experience, one of the reasons maybe for using a GWAC is to consolidate the number of orders that an agency has. And the example that I'd like to offer is State Department's Vanguard program, where they had over 100 different task orders that they were trying to consolidate when they awarded the task order under Alliant Small Business, because it was just too hard for them to manage. There were security issues with managing a far-flung network that they have to manage, and it was a soup to nuts kind of a project. I mean, Vanguard covers everything that State Department IT does, and so consolidating the orders was a big goal that they had, and to try to manage it under just two contracts. So best practice was, in transitioning, was to try to consolidate and make it more efficient for that agency to manage contracts.
Do you want to talk a little bit about FAR 17 and why are we talking about that? Answer his question.
Okay, yeah. So in FAR Part 17, it does say that if you're going to use an interagency contract, you have to do a determination and put it in your file as to if that's the best value for your agency. So the reason I want to talk about it is that, should it be, is that a barrier? Do contracting officers look at that and consider that as a barrier to using interagency contracts, or do they have the misconception that they have to write this determination because it's risky, or that it's something that you maybe shouldn't be doing? Because in contracting, you write DNFs when you're doing something that you maybe shouldn't be doing. And you need higher authority approval to do that.
And maybe getting some ideas of how people convince folks to go with a GWAC rather than creating their own contract, because of course they're part of your marketing team.
So the discussion, it should really be, what I anticipated is that we'd have a discussion about, is there a possibility, or should we consider rewording that to say you're encouraged to use interagency contracts, and if you're not, write a determination for your file as to why you're not. Why are the existing contracts not going to meet your needs, rather than having to justify using an interagency contract to meet those needs?
You want to talk about either of these questions and what would help you guys? What insights you're hoping to get?
I like his wording, so.
Right.
I will add, though, to the FAR Part 17 is our experience is that some agencies have equated the use of the word determination with determination and findings.
Right.
And so it's unfortunate that we're using that word and we sort of extrapolate to another thing. And the DNF is a more onerous thing for a contracting officer to prepare, or a signature is authority required, as opposed to a letter to the contract that you're describing, which isn't so bad, but unfortunately there are some agencies who have translated that, quote, determination to be a DNF, which is a hurdle, and frankly, who needs more work? So that's a disincentive. So if I were King for a day, I'd do a global search and replace, where it says determination, maybe replace it with something like best procurement approach or something. Eliminate the use, and reserve the word determination where it's truly just meant for DNF. And so hopefully maybe eliminate some of the confusion.
You should be king for the day. So this part one discussion, one of these two sides, will go on for like 40 minutes or so. And so choose your side. And then the second batch of questions are about, oh my God, I don't have my glasses on, how GWAC streamlined the acquisition process and what are the best practices for teaming for success under GWACs. So that's the second question that we'll do in about a half an hour. So choose your sides, and we'll gather at the end to talk about what you learned. Thank you all very much. Thank you guys all.
Thank you.